All right. Today on our lesson, we're doing these word problems that do not have any charts on them. I choose to work these without the chart because I feel like drawing out the chart takes a bunch of extra time. All right, and I know y'all don't like to waste much time, so I'm going to try to avoid that, all right? Now, some of the other math teachers, like Miss Donahue, Brandon got split up in his class earlier. Miss Donahue still is using the charts on this. That's fine. In fact, what hopefully you'll discover is we're going to do the same steps. Miss Donahue likes to do it with a chart. I prefer to do it without one. I feel like it gives me a little bit more space and freedom, okay? So these are kind of like what we did yesterday, but we do not have charts on here. So I'm not going to draw out the chart. So what I want you to remember, guys, is if you were like, I was really nailing these charts, technically you can still work them out with a chart. Here's the big difference. Yesterday with the charts, the patterns were pretty easy to find. Y'all agree? Like there were some bigger numbers. Some of those were a little bit difficult. But overall on the homework, most of the patterns were easy to find. Today, the patterns are not going to be as easy. Okay? So let's go ahead. I'm going to number this. And today we are looking at number 29 in this classroom. All right. So these are examples. We're going to do 1 through 4. I'm going to do number 1 for you. All right. Number 1, the pattern is really easy. But I'm still going to use it. I'm still going to do this problem the way I'm going to do every other problem. Okay. So what's cool about this is on the chart. Could I tell you do this every time? Yesterday? Now, it's like sometimes you multiply, sometimes you divide, sometimes you do both. You have to use your brain a lot to figure that out. Today, we're going to do number 1 the same way. We're going to do number 2 the same way. We're going to do number 3 the same way. We're going to do number 4. We're going to do every problem the exact same way. That's one of the things that I love about math is that there's one way to do it for the most part, and if you do it that way, you can get the same answer every time. All right. So for number 1, it says, out of 30 students surveyed, 10 have a dog. Based on these results, how many of the 300 students in the school have a dog? So the first thing that I want us to do today is I want us to circle the first ratio. We're not going to write anything down. I just want us to circle in the problem where it says the first ratio. So Truett, what am I going to circle?
The 30.
Carlos? I want us to circle the first ratio, the whole thing. Sean?
30, 17.
The 30 and the 17. The 30 students and the 17 have a dog. Guys, we got to have the whole thing because a ratio has how many numbers? 2. Do y'all agree that the 30 and 17 are together? It's 30 students surveyed, and how many of them have a dog? 17 out of that 30, okay? So those two numbers go together. That's my first ratio. Have I written anything else down yet? No. All right. Now it says, based on these results, how many of the 300 students have a dog? So what I want to ask you is, in my question, so I ask a question, that last part says, how many of the 300 students have a dog? Do y'all agree that that's a question? In the question, what number does it tell me? In the question, what number? Tivit? 300. So I want you to underline that. What is the 300 talking about, Tivit? Students. Since 300 is talking about students, when I write my fraction, students goes on the bottom. So I'm going to kind of put a little arrow here. That question, whatever number is in the question, it gets to decide what goes on the bottom. Okay? So whatever is in the question picks what goes on the bottom. Are you all okay with that? So that said students, so I wrote students. Which means here I'm going to put my fraction bar up above that. Okay? Do y'all see how I've made a fraction now? Okay. Looking at the first ratio, it said 30 and it said 17. Which of those numbers is going to go on the bottom here with my students? Sean? 30. So what number has to go on the top, Sean? 17. Sean, can you tell me what 17 is talking about? Have a dog. So I'm just going to write up here, have a dog. So it kind of does look like a chart, doesn't it? I'm just writing my fractions there. Are we okay with that? To me, this is a little bit shorter instead of having to draw out all that stuff. Okay. All right. So we have our fraction. Y'all good with that? Okay, the next step, I'm going to put a little arrow right here. And so I'm going to write down what the next step is, and then y'all are going to tell me how to do it because we've done this before. we want to make a unit rate. So this is going back to last week. Make a unit rate. Does anyone remember? How do I make a unit rate? Kelsey? Divide by the bottom number, because our goal is to have a 1 down there. So I'm going to divide. So I'm going to put divide by 30. Divide by 30. Okay? Are we good so far? And you're going to do this every time. Okay? So now on the bottom it says 30 divided by 30, which is 1. So I put my equal sign. I'm going to put a 1 on the bottom. All right, and I'm going to get my calculator out now. All right, Dell's class is really great about signing these out. So I want to thank y'all for that. Okay. So when I put that in my calculator and I do 17, turn it on, 17 divided by 30, my calculator gives me something kind of funky, doesn't it?
Yes.
Do y'all see all that? So remember what that means when these 6s are repeating, that means that I can put a bar there. So what I'm going to write on my paper and what I do in my calculator are different, okay? So I'm going to leave my calculator just like that. And I'm going to put it to the side so that I can write down 0.5 and then 6 with a bar. Because remember, it's 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. The reason it gives you a 7 is the calculator knows what's going to keep coming. 6s, and if I'm rounding 5 or more, raise the score. So that's why they made the last one a 7, okay? All right, have I touched my calculator yet, guys? No. Right. So leave that there for now. Do not touch anything on the calculator. Zach? Please go ahead. Next time, make sure you sign one out when you come in, okay? All right. The next step. What am I trying to change this to on the bottom? 300, right? Do you see where it says students? I want to make my students 300, so I'm going to put times 300. Times 300, because that's what I underlined. Every single time, what you multiply is what you underline, okay? So guys, watch how I'm going to do this. Do you see where it says that in my calculator? Have I touched it yet? All I want you to do is hit times and hit 300. Because what it says is that A and S. The calculator knows the answer before was repeating, doesn't it? Do I have a way to put a number repeating in my calculator? No. So I have to make sure it uses the answer. And I'm going to put times 300. When I push enter, what do I get here? Hunter? And there's my answer that Hunter said. All right, so I'm going to put equals. I have 170 on the top over what's on the bottom?
300.
300. All right, now remember we said have a dog. That's my 170. 300 is my students. Okay, so let's answer the question. Now, guys, I have not been very picky, but I'm going to be picky today. Because in English and reading classes, haven't y'all learned that when it asks you a question, you have to basically rewrite the question, but as a sentence, as a complete sentence, exactly. And guys, some of us aren't writing the question as a sentence. So let's look at that again. That's what I really want us to try to do today, because you do it in English. It's important to do in reading. Guys, this is something you need to be able to do in social studies and science and everything, okay? So it says, how many of the 300 students in the school have a dog? What did I just get as my answer on top? 170. So I'm going to say 170, and then I'm just going to write what that said. Of the 300 students in the school have a dog. Do you see I'm just rewriting that sentence now?
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to put 170 of the 300 students in the school, because it says that as well, in the school, writing this down, have a dog. Okay, and all I did was I read that question and I wrote it as a sentence. Okay. That was a lot, wasn't it? Remember, I knew 170 was my answer because it comes back here where it says have a dog. Also, 300 was in my question, okay? All right. Number 2, if 1 out of 12 students at a school share a locker, how many share a locker in a school of 456? So again, let's circle our first ratio. What am I going to circle? My first ratio. Chris?
12.
Close. Remember, ratio, two things. Anahi? Okay, are the 12 and 456 in the same sentence? Double check that. Alana? 12 and 1. Do you see where it says 1 out of 12? Now 1, they wrote it out in words to try to trick you. They're being a little tricky here. Okay, am I ready to write my fraction yet? No. We need to figure out what goes on the bottom. Raise your hand if you can tell me. What number am I looking at? Carlos? 456. And what is 456 talking about, Carlos? Students. Zach, I'm about to take it up. I need it on the desk unless we're working with it, okay? So, since 456 is talking about students, I'm going to write students on the bottom. Okay? So, I have students on the bottom, which means in my 1 and my 12, which one of those goes next to the word students? Carlos?
No.
What number goes next to the word students in my 1 and my 12? 12, because it says 1 out of 12 students. So 12 is going to go next to that. All right. What number is going to go on the top of that, Tony?
456.
Look at it. It's 1 out of 12 that we circled. 12, what number is with it? What other numbers? 1. So even though it's spelled out, we're using the number 1. All right. Now this one's a little tricky because it's not right next to it. What is 1 talking about? Truett? Not just the locker. Every student has a locker. Share a locker. So 1 out of the 12, y'all see where it says share a locker? So right here, I'm going to write share a locker. And kind of squeeze that in. Now, fortunately, guys, y'all are kind of, so when I was in school, in middle school, starting at 6th grade, we always had lockers. But it's kind of getting to where now, y'all don't have lockers this year. We're still not sure if we will have lockers next year. The new high school that they just built does not have a single locker in it. So it's kind of one of those, like, lockers are becoming a thing that isn't really used anymore at school. So it's kind of something y'all don't have to worry about, I guess, sharing a locker. But, huh? It said we're not?
Yeah.
You are? Okay. All right. Real quick. So okay, focus on math. Bring it back, okay? What are we going to do next? So now that I have 1 over 12, Sean? Divide it by 12, because now we're at the part where it says make it a unit rate. So that means divide by 12. All right, again, I'm going to type that, 12 divided by 12, I know what that is. What's 12 divided by 12, guys? 1. And then I can type my 1 divided by 12 in my calculator again. I get that funky thing. How am I going to write that on my answer? Camilla? 0.083 with a bar. Okay. What's going to be next? Who thinks they can tell me what to do next? Amaya? Times it by 456. Awesome job. Times 456 equals. So, again, have I touched that in my calculator yet? All I'm going to do is hit times 456 equals, what do we get there, Javon? 38 over what? 456. All right, now remember, I can look to the side. 456 is talking about student. 38 is talking about share a locker. Let's read our question and see if I can get an answer for that. Tony, you look like you're ready, okay? Question?
Shouldn't we be using
For the times, I'm okay with us using X here. Sometimes I get a little sloppy with that. And when I'm doing scratch work, I use that regular one. If you want to use the dot, you can. Okay? So read the question. It says, how many share a locker in a school of 456? I want you to repeat exactly that, but with a sentence. Camilla.
38 students out of 100.
Okay? Look at the question. Does my question say out of anywhere? So I want us to work on restating that question like what we're learning in our English and reading classes. Kelsey?
38 share a locker in a school of 456.
38, and I'm going to put students with that. Students, and then I'll write the share a locker in a school of 456 students. Okay, because how many was the 38 students, right? And then we're writing share a locker in a school of 456 students. Okay. So, do y'all see again, we're just rewording that question. And guys, my folks that are going to have access testing coming up, this is a huge part of that, being able to restate your question. That's a huge thing to give you some points on that access test, okay? All right. Number three. If 84 cookies will serve 28 students, how many cookies are needed for 30 students? What is my first ratio that I'm going to circle? Chris. 84 and 28. So I'm going to circle that whole thing. 84 students will serve 28. 84 cookies will serve 28 students. Okay? All right. Zach, what tells me what goes on the bottom? What number tells me what to put on the bottom? What number tells me what to put on the bottom?
28.
Owen? 30, because that's in my question, okay? So I want you to look back. Remember, in number 1, we underlined 300. In number 2, we underlined 456. Today, in number 3, we're underlining 30. And what is 30 talking about? Students. So because 30 says 30 students, I'm going to put students on the bottom. Okay? So what number in my circle goes next to that? Sean. What does it say? Students. What number goes next to that? 28. Which means my 84 has to go on the top. Okay, what is 84 talking about? What am I going to label that as? Hunter? Cookies. Okay, first step. Yes.
We're supposed to put 30 on the bottom, right? You put 28.
All right, so 30 tells me what number from my circle to put in the bottom. So if that is students, students goes on the bottom. Does that make sense? So I guess I should reword that. Thank you, Zach, for asking about that. 30 is what we're underlining, but we're underlining what matches with it, and the word is what we put on the bottom, okay? So it really just tells me my word. All right, that helped you too, didn't it, Maya? See, Zach, good question. Thank you for asking that. All right, what's my next step going to be? Next step, Maribel. 28, yes, good. We're going to divide by 28. Okay, so again, on the bottom, 28 divided by 28 is? 1. In my calculator, 84 divided by 28, Javon? 6.
I got 3.
3, I think, sounds right. 3. So type that in again. 84 divided by 28. All right, so 84 divided by 28 should be 3. Okay? What is next, Noah? Okay. Bring it here. All right. What am I going to do on my next step? Gabby? What do I need to do next? So after I divide by 28, now what do I do? Okay, so if I look up here, I divided. What came next? Okay, I'm multiplying. Very good. Now, how do I know which number to multiply? What number have I not used in that problem yet, Gabby? $30. So that's what we're multiplying by. All right, so I multiply by 30. All right, and what does that give me, Olivia? Okay, 90 over 30. So remember, 30 is my students. 90 is my cookies. Give me a sentence that says, how many cookies are needed for 30 students? Remember, repeat that, but with my answer. Camilla.
90 cookies is there for 30 students.
Okay, that's very good. But again, I would count that as correct, Camilla. But it says, how many cookies are needed for 30 students? Does that say anything about serving them? Okay, so I just want us to word exactly like it says with our answer, all right? Caitlin? 90 cookies are needed. Again, your wording, Camilla, that was a great sentence. I would count it. I just want us to practice that restating. 90 cookies are needed for 30 students. And we can see that's exactly what that question was asking, okay? That's exactly what Camilla just said. Again, that's a good sentence, but I'm just wanting us to restate that question in a sentence format, okay? All right, Zach, can we do one more problem? All right, okay. All right, number 4, a survey reported that out of 50 teenagers, 9 said they get their news from the newspaper. At this rate, how many out of 300 teenagers would you expect to get their news from the newspaper? All right, what am I going to circle here? Sean?
50 and 9.
50 teenagers out of the 9, or 9 out of 15. All right, what is going on the bottom? What number determines what goes on the bottom? Hunter? 300. And 300 is talking about? Teenagers. So I'm going to go ahead and write teenagers on the bottom over here. Teenagers, just writing it on the bottom there, okay? Yeah. I like to just use the words in the problem. Okay. All right, so what number from my circle is going on the bottom, Javon? 50. So that means that 9 has to be on top, because that's the only thing in my circle. What is 9 talking about? Now, this is a little tricky. What is 9 talking about? Truett? It's not saying 9 newspapers out of 50 teenagers. That doesn't really work. Carlos?
Survey report.
Mm-mm. Sean? Owen? That's talking about the teenagers said they get the news from the newspaper. Oh, I thought you said newspapers. Okay. Okay, so we can put, so they're the ones that get their news from the newspaper. So I'm just going to put get news from newspaper. Because that's what it says. They get their news from the newspaper. So get news from newspaper. All right. What do I have to do next? Kelsey. Divide by the bottom number. So dividing by 50. Okay, what is that going to give me? Hunter?
0.18 over 1.
0.18 over 1. Excellent job. Okay, I'm going to pause here. What am I going to do next? Someone new. Seeing the same hands. Carlos, not calling on you again. Tivit? Multiply by 300. Excellent job. Equals. All right, what do I get as that fraction? Hunter? 54 over 300. So 54 is my teenagers. 300 is my teenagers. 54 is my ones that get the news from the newspaper. So again, how many out of 300 teenagers would you expect to get their news from the newspaper? So I'm going to start with out of 300 teenagers. Out of 300 teenagers. Because that's what that says. Out of 300 teenagers, you expect, because it says how many would you expect, so I'm going to put you expect my answer, which was 54, to get their news from a newspaper. from a newspaper. Okay? So out of 300 teenagers, you expect 54 to get their news from a newspaper. All right? We're going to start our homework together real quick. If you need to go, go real quick. I want everyone to get out a piece of paper. Once you've written that down, get out a piece of paper. Please use your piece of paper. All right, so guys, I need us to do this quickly, please. I'm still recording. I need us to do this quickly. Make sure we're updating our supply stock. All right. Hey, that's fine. I totally understand. All right. So what I want us to do real quick is at the top of our paper, we're going to set that up to say the assignment, which is on page 183 in your textbook. We're doing numbers 5 through 13. So if you get home and you need to finish working on this, look in your textbook. All right, so please set that up on your paper. Okay. All right, so we're going to start on number 5. That's what I have at the top of this paper, and I'm going to label this first number, number 5. All right. Number 5, okay? Since this isn't our textbook and we can't really write on our textbook as well, I'm going to do this one a little bit differently than what we were doing in our notes when I ask my questions, okay? So make sure you listen to the question. On number 5, what number decides what goes on the bottom? What number decides what goes on the bottom? McKenna? 28. 28 is in my question and at the end, right? What is 28 talking about? What does it say next to it, Anahi? Days. So I'm going to write days at the bottom. I'm going to kind of leave a little bit of space. So days. So raise your hand if you can tell me what number am I going to write next to it, because it's not 28. What am I going to write next to those days, Kelsey? 4. Because if I look up here, do you see the 20 gallons for 4 days? That's the fraction we need. So I'm going to put 4. What goes on top of the 4? What number goes with my 4? Carlos? 120. And Brandon, what is my 120 talking about? The gallons of water, and if you just want to put gallons, I'm okay with that. Gallons. Okay. Are we okay so far? All right. What am I going to do next? Truett. Divide by? 4. Excellent. So what do I get as that new fraction, Javon? 30 over 1. And what am I going to do next? Amaya. Sorry. Perfect. Times it by 28. Would it be helpful if I found a seat for you closer up? Okay. Remind me tomorrow and we'll see if we can do that, okay? All right, so we're doing times 28. What do I get as that final fraction, Carlos?
840 and 28.
840 over 28. Do y'all agree with that?
Yes.
All right, let's read our sentence. How many gallons of water does a Clydesdale drink in 28 days? Give me a sentence here. Camilla.
A Clydesdale drinks about 840 gallons of water in 28 days.
A Clydesdale drinks 840 gallons of water in 28 days. All right, so it's not super helpful, but we got number 5 done together. The first one. All right. If you want to get a picture of this before you leave so you can work on it in warrior time, it's in your textbook.